So it is 1:30 by my watch, which means we'll go ahead and get started. Today's presentation is called Getting Credit for Your Referrals, Everything You Want to Know About Analytics. My name is Emilie Burke, and I'll give a little bit more background in just a second. But I just wanted to say thanks so much for sharing a bit of your afternoon with me. Let me start by congratulating you. You've built your course, you've written your book, you're ready to go to market. And now you want to make the money. That's what we all want, of course, right? You decide that you're going to bring in your new customers through Facebook ads. Your buddy Joe told you it was effective for him, you've heard it from your friends, and you think this is a strategy that's going to work for you. So you decide to run a Facebook ad. You spend $100, you log into Facebook Ads Manager, and it tells you that you've got 10 new acquired customers. So tell me, what is your customer acquisition cost? $10, right? For those of you that are unfamiliar, customer acquisition cost is the total amount of your marketing spend divided by the number of customers acquired. You've had so much luck with Facebook, you're really confident that you know exactly where your audience is. And she is also on Pinterest. So you decide to run an ad on Pinterest as well. You log into Pinterest, you spend $100. The Pinterest Ads Manager tells you you've done well, you've got 10 new customers. So what is your customer acquisition cost? Let me guess, you're thinking $10, and unfortunately, you're wrong. You see, you've got your targeting down so perfectly. You know exactly where your customer is, that you found her not just on Facebook, but also on Pinterest. When you rely on ad platforms to provide you with accurate data, you are only getting the data that they are aware of. They will understate your customer acquisition cost because they don't know where else you are touching your customers. So the reality of this situation is while you've spent $100 on Facebook and $100 on Pinterest, your number of customers acquired was not 20, but only 17. 3 of the customers that you were told you acquired were touched by the same platforms, and they are agnostic to whether or not those customers were touched by another platform. Your actual customer acquisition cost, instead of being $10, is now $11.75, nearly 20% more than you had originally optimized for. Now, how do you know that I know what I'm talking about? Well, as I mentioned earlier, my name is Emilie Burke. I graduated from Princeton back in 2015. I joined a post-college fellowship called Venture for America that takes recent college graduates and puts them in startups to work. I was employee number 9 at Baltimore-based Allaview, working in the ed tech space, and I was the first dedicated data hire. I was there when the company tripled in size from 9 to 27, and we raised our $5 million Series A. I then went on to Smile Direct Club, a Nashville-based e-orthodontia startup. The company had just raised their $47 million Series C. I was the first dedicated data hire yet again. I built their data infrastructure from the ground up and helped them create reporting so that they could scale marketing spend from less than $100,000 to over $500,000 a month. We spent on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, all the platforms you're familiar with, but also platforms you're likely less familiar with, including Yahoo ads, Outbrain, Taboola, and television ads. After Smile Direct Club, I joined Todoist. The parent company is named Doist. It's a productivity-based company scattered all over the world with 50 employees. The company is completely bootstrapped and has raised $0, makes over $5 million a year. Today, I work at tech unicorn GitLab, recently minted with a valuation of over $1 billion. I'm the 3rd member of the data team and the first dedicated data analyst. Today, we're going to talk about 3 different topics. The first is attribution methodologies. The second, UTM parameters, and the third, analytics alternatives to Google. If any of this sounds intimidating, please don't let it. I promise that my first language is English, then tech. First, attribution methodologies. There are 3 primary attribution methodologies that you should be aware of. First touch, last touch, and multi-touch. Here, let's talk about the customer journey. Sally has come to your site to buy your widget, whatever it may be. She first comes to you through a Facebook ad. Then, later on, she remembers something she saw on your site, she types your website in directly, she visits you. Later, she's scrolling through Twitter, she sees another ad of yours, she clicks, she ends up on your site. Still no conversion. She comes to your site organically. This is where you post something on Facebook, or any other site, do not put dollars behind it. She comes to your site through an organic post. Finally, she Googles something, your AdWords ad comes up at the top, that's Google paid, and then finally she converts. In a first touch attribution model, Facebook is going to get the total credit for her conversion. In a last touch attribution model, Google AdWords is going to get the credit for her conversion. And in a multi-touch attribution model, a little bit of her conversion is going to be credit to each of the touches along her customer journey. So first touch, when would you use each of these attribution methodologies? Excuse me. First touch, this is common for organizations that have a funnel product. If you sell a product for $5, $10, $100, that's really only meant to get your customer to buy a final product at $2,000. This is where a first touch attribution model makes a lot of sense. You're optimizing for a number that happens much more quickly. Last touch is common for for companies with a physical product. For example, I may buy a clicker multiple times throughout my life. What is it that gets me in the door every single time I make a purchase? Finally, also it's worth mentioning, a last touch attribution model is the Google Analytics default. So when you log into Google Analytics and you set goals around conversion, it is by default using a last touch attribution model. If you'd like to customize it, you can, but the default setting is last touch. Finally, multi-touch. This is the ideal attribution model, but it is very, very difficult to implement and very, very expensive to implement. There aren't really tools out of the box that are cost effective at implementing a multi-touch attribution model. Second, there is no real industry standard around a multi-touch attribution model. What percentage of credit goes to the first touch? What percentage of credit goes to the last touch? What about all those touches in between? Which are the most valuable? There are no industry standards to answer this question, and so we do not see multi-touch attribution models really abound. One of the common answers, though, like I've said, is not standard, is that a first touch should get 20% of credit, a last touch should get 40% of credit, and the remaining 40% gets divided to the touches in between. Why do you need to understand attribution methodologies? Because as a content creator and a content producer, you're probably on both sides of this conversation. If you're working with affiliate programs, you need to understand what attribution model they're using for your goods that you're helping them sell. A common affiliate program is Amazon affiliates. They use a last touch attribution model. This means that the person who gets credit for the purchase is the last person whose link was clicked on before the purchase was made. If you're creating your own attribution model because you are helping a program sell, you need to consider what sort of affiliate program you would like to use. Many of the off-the-shelf affiliate tools have decisions built in for this. This is a question you need to ask when you're evaluating a tool. An example, if you're selling a very niche book, for example, in the real estate space, you may have two friends who are helping you sell it. Now, if Joanne, a blog reader, sees both of your friends write about your new real estate book, and she clicks on both of their links, who should get credit to the purchase? The person who introduced her to the book or the one who she finally triggered to buy after. The third point to consider when you think about attribution methodologies is that you should have a target customer acquisition cost, and you need to consider how your attribution methodology will be affected, or your target customer acquisition cost will be affected by the attribution methodology you choose to use. Next, UTM parameters. You may have heard of these before if you're in the world of digital marketing. UTM parameters are how you tell your site where its traffic is coming from. While increasingly technology is getting better and Google can better predict and use lots of factors to figure out where your traffic is coming from, UTM parameters are the only surefire way to know exactly where they are coming from. You can use UTM parameters to get as granular as I know this click came from this exact Facebook post, or as high level as you set it to be. I know that this traffic came from Pinterest. Many social media tools today, such as Buffer, come with default tagging for UTM parameters built in, making your life much easier. There are 5 UTM parameters. You should consider the top 3 on this slide to be mandatory. UTM source is where you tell your site where the traffic is coming from, exactly what website the traffic is coming from. This might be Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. UTM campaign is where you tell it what campaign this traffic is a part of. 21 days of Christmas, 31 days of Halloween, new shoes on sale, whatever the campaign may be. You can use the same campaign across sources. UTM medium is an abstraction above source. This is what will indicate if traffic was paid or organic, if it's a cost per click, or a display ad. UTM content and UTM term allow you to get to an additional level of granularity. Now, there are alternatives to Google Analytics out there today. Before I dive into them, though, let me make one thing clear. You should have Google Analytics installed on your site today. It is the industry standard, and it is the only metric that advertisers or collaborators will care about. That being said, you should also consider an alternative. You can add an alternative to your site with almost no performance hit if you're concerned about SEO. It's a great way to ensure that your numbers are accurate before you find yourself in a pickle down the road. Many times, other tools are easier to use and don't push you into their certification so that you can understand your own user data. And finally, we have the saying, when the tool is free, you are the product. And this is true of Google Analytics, not just in you, but also of all of your site visitors. Google Analytics is free because they're collecting and amassing this user data. As the industry becomes more conscious of your users' data privacy, we may find that people are less okay with Google Analytics. It would be better to have an alternative in place today so that you have continuity of metrics over time, as opposed to switching to a new tool at some point in the future. There are 5 alternatives to Google Analytics that I've laid out for you today. I have personal experience with 4 of these 5. The first is Heap Analytics. If you have less than 30,000 page views a month, I strongly suggest you install Heap Analytics before you go to bed tonight. It will take you less than 5 minutes of time. It is free up to that point. After that point, it becomes quite costly at, I think, $2,000 a month. Heap has the best and easiest to use interface for understanding where your traffic is coming from, what their retention looks like over time, and exactly what they're doing on your site. It requires 0 technical skills to implement. Next, Snowplow Analytics. This is a well-known, well-respected open source analytics tool. It can be free if you self-host it, if you know how to do it. It requires a lot of technical implementation, but like I said, free is everyone's favorite price. Next, Fathom Analytics. This also has a free option if you self-host it. If you need to host it yourself, it comes at $9 a month. Simple Analytics, I'm not too familiar with, but has very strong reviews. And finally, Mixpanel Analytics. It's most known for its event tracking. It's common for apps and things of that sort, but it's also an effective tool for web pages. Thanks so much for your time, folks. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I'm going to hang out here for a bit. If you do have questions, please feel free to come ask. Thank you.